It is not unknown to the public what is happening to Palestinians under Israel's illegal occupation. Moreover, with the presence of gadgets, social media, literally everything is at our fingertips. Since the Israelis forcefully took the Palestinians' land, our Palestinian brothers and sisters are left to suffer. Today, we are going to specifically dive into the eyes, minds, and hearts of the Palestinians prisoners under the commands of Israeli soldiers. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Sinar Daily's podcast, The Palestinian Diaries, and I hope everyone is in good health. I am Zuhra, and today I'm with two esteemed guests, Prisoners Diaries, Palestinian Voices from the Israeli Gulag, author Puan Norma Hashim, and Palestinian activist Baha Hilo. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
How are you guys doing today?
We're well, alhamdulillah. Baha as well?
Alhamdulillah, yeah.
So I heard Baha went to the conference,
Yes.
international conference
Yeah.
on Palestine in Norma.
We
So
were-
how was it?
We were both speakers at the conference,
Yes.
and this was a conference organized by the Malaysian Women's Coalition on Al-Quds and Palestine. So this conference was quite unique because it was about Palestinian prisoners. And I spoke about the books I wrote. Baha can explain what he spoke about.
My intervention was primarily to explain how Palestinian prisoners are prisoners within larger prisons, like a Palestinian society or the remainings of the Palestinian people in Palestine have been fragmented from one another, and the entrance and exits to their communities are usually in the hands of the Israeli state. So, yeah, we are imprisoned in geography, but also within our prisons there are more prisons.
I see. Okay, so before moving on, I just want to tell our listeners, the Prisoners Diaries, the book by Puan Norma, is a compilation of 22 Palestinian prisoners' experiences in Israeli jails. And the book is a deeply moving series of first-person commentaries on what the prisoners have been enduring for decades in the dark recesses of Israel's unlawful and inhumane network of prisons. And our brother here, Baha, is a Palestinian activist based in Bethlehem. He graduated from Berzut University with a degree in sociology. And Baha has worked with different humanitarian, human rights, and advocacy groups, including the UN, the Joint Advocacy Initiative of the YMCA and YWCA, and Badil Center for Residency and Refugees' Rights. So before moving on, let's just dive into a little, like a gist of Israeli jails. So the Israeli jails are not only filled with grown-up men, but they keep women and children as well there. So this, of course, includes pregnant women too. So I have read some of the prisoners' experiences, and all I can say is it is such a disgrace that there are living humans out there capable of doing such despicable things towards one another. So moving on, Puan Sri, when you first received the stories on what had happened to Palestinians in the Israeli jails, how did that make you feel, and were you probably already were aware of how Palestinians were being treated in the jails?
Well, when I started doing the books, that was 10 years ago. Actually, I had no idea at all about Palestinians in Israeli jails at all. And of course, when I read the stories, I was quite surprised and shocked. And I didn't realize that it was such a terrible thing, that it affects almost every Palestinian family, especially in the West Bank. And these are people who are not criminals in prison, but they are people who are fighting for their rights, for their freedom, and for the dignity of their peoples. So reading the stories humanized them for me, and I felt it was important that I put them in a book, and it turned out to be 3 books, because people need to look at them as humans as well, like us, and also that there's stories that are very moving and should be heard by everybody.
Yeah. So Baha, could you tell us the background of how you first became an activist, and probably you could tell us some of the challenges that you faced while you were carrying your work.
Every Palestinian, in a way, is born an activist because every aspect of your life is controlled by your oppressor, and everything becomes a struggle. So when you take part in the struggle of, like, let's say, drinking water, because the State of Israel deny us access to nearly 87% of our water resources. When you want to move from one place to the other, the struggle you do in order to go to places of worship, go into school. So one of the earliest memories I had is like having to go through clouds of tear gas, in order to go to school, So who goes through those clouds of tear gas? Like people who are activists in a way. So in a way, that's normal life. The shift in my understanding of how abnormal and criminal the reality happened, the reality we lived through happened. The shift was like after I moved to nearby Sri Lanka. I lived there for a year, and I started like looking at my life and what was forced to normalize, and realized like there's nothing normal. It's completely abnormal to have your life being controlled and dominated by a foreign power. And my activism worked towards three things. One, trying to understand the psychological and mental damage that is caused by oppression. Second, trying to communicate it. And third time is trying to do work on the ground with families who are experiencing robbery, denial of rights, and so on and so forth. So in a way, it's a process that the Enlightenment started about 18 years ago, and I hope it continues.
I see. So, well, from this point of view, every Palestinian was born an activist. So, Baha, since you were born in Bethlehem, which is also a birthplace for Daud alayhi salam and Isa alayhi salam, our prophets, it's also a place I heard the most beautiful place in Palestine with a rich, long history. So, well, maybe the listeners also want to know, like, how is the situation there currently?
Let me start by saying, like, almost every old and ancient city and town in Palestine is beautiful in its own. So we don't have that competition. Of course, like, people who live in Hebron believe Hebron is the most beautiful. People who live in Al-Quds, Jerusalem, think it is beautiful. Nablus the same, and so on. But every corner of Palestine has its own private beauty. The significance of the city of Bethlehem comes from its 4,000 years old history. It's commonly known, as you said, as being the birthplace of Dawood alayhi salam. Dawood alayhi salam inspired resistance of oppression by the use of the stone, right?
Yeah.
So when you
Yes.
see Palestinian teenagers who are the same age of Dawood alayhi salam when he was forced to go into battle with Goliath or Jalut, he was a teenager, That story of inspiration continues up until today, and you see it visibly with Palestinian teenagers confronting Israeli tanks, military vehicles, armed soldiers armed to the teeth with nothing more than a stone. The second thing about Isa alayhi salam, of course, the city of Bethlehem is located between two vibrant towns, Jerusalem, Al-Quds in the north, and Hebron al-Khalil in the south. And it has survived through existing through those two towns. Now, it's very difficult for us to relate to the significance of the city now. Because first of all, the State of Israel managed to separate the northern part of the city that leads you towards Bethlehem, towards Jerusalem, separate the highway that was used for 4,000 years. That highway or roads completely separating Beit Lahem from the northern extension on Quds, and also there is a gate in the south that separates Beit Lahem from Hebron. To add to that, like Beit Lahem is filled with Palestinian survivors of the ethnic cleansing, refugees. The town of Beit Lahem is a small town, but it had to provide, shelter and safety for Palestinian refugees who were expelled from 64 communities. Many of those communities were larger than the city of Beit Lahem back in 1946, 47, and 48 in terms of population. But once again, being able to look after strangers and look after refugees is not something new to Beit Lahem. Isa alayhi salam was born there. He was looked after by the residents of Beit Lahem 2,000 years ago. So there are so many beautiful aspects that we celebrate in Beit Lahem day to day, but so much of that beauty is overshadowed by Israeli criminal behavior.
So, like, how does it feel to to have to live under the military occupation, and and maybe it would be great if you can get some insights on the military checkpoints that you said that they closed up the roads, which like give restrictions to people from moving here and there, or maybe like from visiting their families and so on.
Okay, when you say living under Israeli military occupation, you're talking about living under bureaucracy and military system. Israeli military rule is made of 1,665 military orders. If you break any of them, then you are subject to arrest, later on sent to a military court, sentenced, and locked up in jail. Those 1,665 rules, let's say, cover almost every aspect of your life. Even a gathering that a soldier deems to be political, people could be arrested for doing it. Right now we have 6 human rights organizations that are doomed to be like terrorist organizations by the Israeli army. Why? Because the Israeli army considers their documentation of Israeli criminal behavior to be political, right? Defense for Children International is one of them. You have an organization that defends or provides legal assistance to Palestinian minors who are locked up in Israeli jails between 14 and 18 years old. The organization that provides them with legal aid is doomed to be a terrorist organization, while the terrorists that lock Palestinian children up, kidnap them away from their families, are considered to be, law enforcement. How to live in this? I think we share the same quality as human beings all over the planet, which is survival. You survive whatever conditions imposed upon you. And Israeli criminal behavior is imposed upon us, and we have no other choice but to survive it. Many of us survive it by, denying its existence, thinking it's normal. Many people survive it by being told that it's the only thing we can do. Many people survive it by rejecting it, but survival is the name of the game. But it's like you are surviving something that is completely unfair, something completely criminal, and you just live to survive another day of criminal behavior. Your basic freedoms are kind of denied. And the basics for denying your freedom is rooted in birth. Like if you're born to a Palestinian family, you know that all your rights that you take for granted here in Malaysia are granted. Like when you want to move from one place to the other, the only concern, like you want to move between 2 cities, the only concern will be traffic. And time.
Yes.
In Palestine, like the main concerns will be, are you allowed to go there? Like in Beit Lahem, we live, 15 to 20 minutes away from the holiest places for Palestinian Muslims and for Palestinian Christians. The holiest places are in Al-Quds. We live 20 minutes away from those places. We're denied access to them. It's not a matter of traffic. It's not a matter of distance. It's a matter of that you are born to a Palestinian family, therefore you are not allowed.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, like what I can see is that our Palestinian brothers and sisters are being denied from their basic human rights, basically. So this
From
is
the day you are born.
yeah, from the day they were born. So this is basically a form of crime in humanity. We can say that. So what are other crime humanities that happens in to our Palestinian brothers and sisters? You know, like the apartheid laws that deny Palestinians the same way as Israelis. Maybe you can tell us like what do you think started this and how did it happen?
Okay, one of the biggest problems that we face when we try to communicate Palestine is to remind people that Israel and Palestine are not as separate as, let's say, Malaysia and Singapore. No, or Malaysia and Thailand. Israel and Palestine are two different names for the same geography. You show the map of Palestine to an Israeli racist, he will tell you this is the map of Israel. You show the map of Israel to a Palestinian, he will tell you it's the map of Palestine. The entire geography of Palestine is controlled completely by the Israeli government. If you are born to a Jewish family, the Israeli government grants and protects your rights. If you are born to a Palestinian family, you are subject to one of the many different Israeli legal systems, because the State of Israel created a complicated reality that prevents people, regular people, from understanding the criminal behavior of the state. Like if you are born to a Palestinian family, you are oppressed. If you are born to a Jewish family, your rights are granted and protected.
Even Netanyahu actually said publicly that Israel is the state for the Jewish people only.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's
By
not
law.
a state for all the citizens.
Yeah.
So that's apartheid.
And now when we're talking about the crimes against humanity, there are 3 crimes against humanity international community agrees on. The crime of genocide. There are elements of that crime being carried out by the State of Israel. The crime of forced population transfer, ethnic cleansing. 66.7% of the Palestinian people are subject and fell victims of that crime. And the third crime against humanity is the crime of apartheid. The crime of apartheid is defined as a crime that takes place when the system in control creates a system of domination of one group of people over the other for the reason of race, ethnicity, language, and language and faith, then that regime is committing the crime of apartheid, and that regime should be sanctioned. The State of Israel has 4 different separate systems that are imposed upon Palestinians, where Palestinians are dominated, because of being born. From the day you are born until the day you die, you are dominated by the State of Israel. Now, many people say Israel is not an apartheid regime. It's true, because they don't operate one apartheid regime. The apartheid regime imposed on Palestinians surviving in the city of Nazareth, for example, is very different than the apartheid regime imposed on Palestinians surviving in Jerusalem. These two are very different than the military rule or the apartheid rule that is imposed on Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. Those 3 are different than what's imposed on us in Gaza. So Israel operates and maintains 4 systems of apartheid because the State of Israel was established on those pillars. The criminals that founded the State of Israel, nearly 70,000 militants who carried out atrocities to expel the Palestinian people, wanted a state for Jews in Palestine. The only way to create a state for Jewish people in Palestine is to commit the crime of apartheid. So the State of Israel have been founded on apartheid crimes, and today what they are doing is maintaining those apartheid regimes. It doesn't matter if you recognize their apartheid or not. Yeah. It's like Earth is round. It doesn't matter if you believe Earth is flat or not. Your recognition is a reference to your ability to see.
True. That's very true. So, Puan Sri, well, we know that the book Prisoners Diaries was a compilation from a journalist. But have you ever maybe spoken to any of these prisoners personally as they tell their stories? And if you have, maybe you can share with us, with the listeners, one of the most heartbreaking stories by the prisoners that you find unforgettable. I mean, I'm pretty sure like all of the stories are, yeah, all of the
Sad,
stories are,
yes.
yeah, very sad and heartbreaking. But if possible, maybe you can share like one.
I have met actually one of the prisoners has traveled to Malaysia before, Muhammad Al-Drawi in my book. So I've met him. But actually, almost every Palestinian I've met here in Malaysia has knows a prisoner, has been in prison. I can't really name names, but of course there are former prisoners here in Malaysia. Whereas the ones in my book, of course, many of them, it's not easy for them to travel. Once you've actually been put in prison, it's actually difficult to travel outside of Palestine, Israel, because they will not allow you to leave. But I have met several Palestinians here who have been in prison and who have relatives or brothers currently in prison. Yes. So it is actually, I think, Palestine is like an mass incarceration anyway. Probably about 40% of men in the West Bank have been in prison today. In terms of the stories, so many of stories are really, really sad. I think as a wife, as a mother, as a woman, the one that hits me, of course, are all the stories that women wrote about how they are put away from their children. I think there's one by Kahira Al-Saadi, the one actually I think Sina actually had put on the website, where when she was in prison for that time, for the first year, she did not know what happened to the children at all. She didn't know where they were. So after 1 year, she was told that her two sons, she has 2 sons and 2 daughters, the 2 sons would be able to visit her. And then when she saw them, I think I can actually read a bit of it. I marked it. She said here, "A year later, when I was told that my 2 children would be coming to visit me, the news made my spirit fly high into the sky," and that's how happy she was. And then the part where she says when her children finally, when she met them, she said, "When I looked at my 2 innocent children full of questions behind a dirty iron-barred window, I wiped the glass with my clothes." Because, when prisoners meet their families, they are behind a glass and behind iron bars, so you cannot touch them. So this lady is looking at her 2 sons she has not seen for a year. And she couldn't see them, but they looked different to her. And she thought it was something to do with because, and she wiped the glass with her clothes. And she realized that they were looking older, of course, but they were looking so neglected. And she said here that they were my children, Muhammad and Rifat. They were older and they were crying. I asked them to be calm and not to make my tears fall. She said, my words increased their river of tears. They cried even more. And she said, "Oh my God, what had happened to them? Why did they look as if they didn't have a house to live in?" And so it turned out that they were put in an orphanage after she was put in prison. And they didn't know where her 2 daughters were. They had separated the 2 boys from the 2 girls. And she said that at the end, she said, when they left, she said that she felt like a slaughtered sheep. After seeing them, she felt even worse than before, because she had seen them and now she knew that they were in an orphanage and she didn't know where her daughters were. So it was so terrible. It was like, reading the story will make you cry, really.
Yeah.
But also, during the conference that Baha and I took part in, there was also another released female prisoner, Sama Sabai. When she spoke, she also spoke about her experience. And when she was pregnant, she had been arrested and she had been tortured. And finally, when she gave birth, it was forced, a cesarean. She was not even allowed a natural birth. She was taken to a hospital in chains. She gave birth in chains. And after she'd given birth, when they let her see the baby, only after they took the baby away, but when it was time for her to feed the baby, they just released just one of the chains, So she was still in shackles when she was breastfeeding the child. The child became the youngest prisoner in a way, youngest prisoner. He grew up in a underground, a basement, and she was also mentioning. I read also with the interview, and she mentioned later, it was so bad how she was treated in prison. When she was pregnant, she was given food with cockroaches on top, and she lost 30 kilos. You know, when you're pregnant, you're supposed to put on weight.
Yeah.
She actually lost 30 kilos, and she almost lost the baby. I mean, so this is what people go through. You know, it's very inhumane, and you just don't understand the depth of the depravity of the Israeli occupation, how bad it can be, and how badly they treat the prisoners. None of us can withstand this.
Yeah,
I think the Palestinians are made of very tough material.
true,
you know.
So, Puan Sri, you had also funded the Hashim Sani Center for Palestinian Studies at University Malaya.
Yeah.
So, could you tell us a little bit about the foundation, whether there are any ongoing or future projects for the Palestinians' cause?
I founded the center last year because I realized that there was no equivalent in Asia. There was no Center for Palestine Studies here, and we need to look more into it. Palestine is not just a case for relief. It's not a charity case where we just, you know, every Ramadan we can just donate. It's not like that. We have to do more. We have to promote advocacy and awareness. So this is why I started the center. And I wanted a center where it can be funded as well by people who don't have any other agenda except for the Palestinian cause. And so we have a lot of activities planned. Alhamdulillah, we have done a conference last year on settler colonialism. We plan to have a conference every year to mark the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinians on November 29th. And so we are planning also webinars. We just started an online class yesterday, which is quite popular. I'm very glad it went very well, alhamdulillah. It was about the city of Jerusalem and the history and the past and the present. People from all over the world went online to attend our class, and we have 4 more classes. If anyone's interested, just get on our Facebook, our Instagram, Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies.
Okay, that's
you can join.
Hashim Hani Center
Yes.
on Facebook. So, Baha, in 2013, you started focusing on education on Palestine through an initiative called the To Be There. So, can you perhaps explain to us about your work as an educator on Palestine through the project?
To Be There came out of the fact that Palestine is very present in media, and the stories, the views that you read about Palestine are not compatible with the reality, because it's not only imprisonment, it's not only restriction of movement, it's not only home demolition, it's not only like all the criminal behavior that you hear about in media about Palestine, you know, prevent you from seeing that it's a system, prevent you from seeing the context that naturally produces all those criminal behaviors of the State of Israel. So the only way I found useful to help people understand the reality of what's happening in Palestine is by having them physically, spiritually, and mentally present in Palestine. So the only way for you to understand Palestine is that you have to be there. The other thing about To Be There is, like, we bring people in, we expose the 4 different systems of Israeli apartheid. So to help people understand that it's more comprehensive than they can actually understand. You know, we expose the system, we let people understand that Palestine is an ongoing, like, you know, case of oppression. You are born a victim, you will die a victim as long as Israeli criminals are in charge of your life. So the issue is also a third pillar, is like the State of Israel allows more than 3 million guests or foreigners to come visit Palestine, you know? But they direct pilgrimage and tourism in a way that takes you far away from the reality. So I met a lot of Malaysians that visited Al-Aqsa but have no idea what's happening around.
Yeah,
visited the second oldest mosque in Palestine, which is the Mosque of Ibrahim alayhi salam. No idea. They would pass through checkpoints, but if you come with a guide who's so terrorized and scared to even mention to you what the political reality is happening, you know, then how will you?
I
No.
read that the tour guides are vetted by the Israelis as well.
Yeah.
So all the tour guides for people who visit Palestine, they are all provided by the Israeli government or checked by them.
Yeah. Because remember, like, it's also like something about protecting the Zionist narrative, you know? So in a way, to be there, we do a lot of different activities. We invite delegations to come primarily from the West and westernized societies. Now, I understand in Malaysia that there are two schools here, or two opinions. One that says you should not go because you support, by going you support the Israeli oppressor, or you should go because that way you understand better. I understand this. But in the end of the day, you are the only person who can check what your motivation is. If you are coming to Palestine to support the slaughtering of the Palestinian people, or despite of the slaughtering of the Palestinian people, then please stay at home. But if you want to come to Palestine to witness the reality that we are forced to survive, then you are more than welcome.
So being denied on basic human rights, to experience, crime in humanity firsthand, I hope that our listeners did gain some new insights from the discussion earlier. Thank you so much, Puan Sri Norma Hashim and Baha Hilo, for the insights and sharing. For our listeners out there, do not forget to follow Sinar Daily on all social media platforms and download the Sinar Daily app, available now on App Store, Google Play Store, and Huawei App Gallery. This is all from me. I am Zuhra, and we hope to see you in another episode of Palestinian Diaries. Goodbye and stay safe. Assalamu alaikum.